Shalom, welcome back. So we're working our way through the Rock of Yeshua Foundation. We're up to NazActs Book 1, Chapter 60. And so we'll go ahead and get started. When we left off, the high priest had asked for the disciples of Yeshua to come and essentially debate them on whether Yeshua was the Messiah or not. And so we're about halfway through that debate. And so that's kind of where the action is right now. It says, "And behold, one of the disciples of John," this is John the Baptist, "asserted that John was the Messiah and not Yeshua, inasmuch as Yeshua himself declared that John was greater than all men and all prophets. Then said he be greater than all. He must be held greater than Moses and than Yeshua himself. But if he be the greatest of all, then he must be the Messiah. To this Simon the Canaanite, answering, asserted that John was indeed greater than all the prophets and all who were born of women, yet that he is not greater than the Son of Man. Accordingly, Yeshua is also the Messiah, whereas John is only a prophet. And there is as much difference between him and Yeshua as between the forerunner and him whose forerunner he is, or as between him who gives the law and him who keeps the law." Having made these and similar statements, the Canaanite was also silent. After him Barnabas, who also is called Matthias, who was substituted as an apostle in the place of Judas, began to exhort the people that they should not regard Yeshua with hatred nor speak evil of him, for it were far more proper, even for one who might be in ignorance or in doubt concerning Yeshua, to love than to hate him. For God has affixed a reward to love, a penalty to hatred. For the very fact, said he, that he assumed a Judean body and was born among the Judeans, how has not this incited us all to love him? When he had spoken this and more to the same effect, he stopped. Then Caiaphas attempted to impugn the doctrine of Yeshua, saying that he spoke empty things. For he said that the poor are blessed, and promised earthly rewards, and that the better would inherit the earth, and promised that those who maintain righteousness shall be satisfied with food and drink, and many things of this sort. Thomas, in reply, spoke against him and demonstrated that he was unjustly furious over Yeshua, showing that the prophets in whom Caiaphas believes taught these things much more, and did not show in what manner these things are to be, or how they are to be understood, whereas Yeshua pointed out how they are to be taken. And when he has spoken these things and others of the like kind, Thomas also held his peace. After him Caiaphas looked at me, sometimes as if exhorting me, and sometimes as if finding fault with me, and said, "Be quiet. You should not be preaching about Yeshua being a Messiah, because you are bringing destruction upon yourself. For you have gone astray after him, and caused others to go astray." And he was furthermore blaming me of course is Peter, by the way, as if being hasty. "While you are untaught and a fisherman by trade, you happen to be a teacher?" As he spoke these things and many more of the like kind, I said in reply that I incurred less danger if, as he said, this Yeshua were not the Messiah, because I received him as a teacher of the law, but that he was in terrible danger if this be the very Messiah, as assuredly he is, for I believe him who appeared, but for whom else, who has never appeared, does he reserve his faith? But if I, an unlearned and uneducated man, as you say, a fisherman and a rustic, have more understanding than wise elders, this, said I, ought the more to strike terror into you. For if I disputed with the learning, and won over you wise and learned men, it would appear that I had acquired this power by long learning, and not by the grace of divine power. But now, when, as I have said, we unskilled men convince and overcome you wise men, who that has any sense does not perceive that it is not a work of human subtlety, but of divine will and gift. Thus we argued and bore witness, and we who were unlearned men and fishermen taught the priests concerning the one and only God of heaven, the Sadducees concerning the resurrection of the dead, the Samaritans concerning the sacredness of Jerusalem, not that we entered into their cities, but disputed with them in public. The scribes and Pharisees concerning the kingdom of heaven, the disciples of John, that they should not suffer John to be a stumbling block to them, and all the people, that Yeshua is the eternal Messiah. Finally, I warned them that before we should go forth to the Gentiles to preach to them the knowledge of God the Father, they should themselves be reconciled to Yahweh by receiving his Son. And I told them, for in this way you are able, once you know Yeshua, to receive the Holy Spirit by the true baptism in the name of the Son of God, and make confession, believing only in Yahweh concerning things that he has taught. And in this way you shall receive salvation and eternal life, for otherwise it is impossible, even if you were to offer up myriads of sacrifices to him. For we, said I, have ascertained beyond doubt that God is much angered with the sacrifices which you offer, the time of sacrifices having now passed away. And because you will not acknowledge that the time for offering victims is now past, therefore the temple shall be destroyed, and the abomination of desolation shall stand in the holy place. And then the gospel shall be preached to the Gentiles for a testimony against you, that your unbelief may be judged by their faith. For though throughout the ages the whole world was infested by an evil inclination, either secretly or openly, the doctor was nevertheless there for it as often as he was summoned for a visitation for its recovery. Behold, therefore, we have witnessed to every one of you regarding the thing that is deficient in you. It is now up to you to examine this matter that is beneficial to you and to act. When I had thus spoken, the whole multitude of the priests were in a rage, because I had foretold to them the overthrow of the temple, which, when Gamaliel, a chief of the people, saw, who was secretly our brother in the faith, but by our advice remained among them, because they were greatly enraged and moved with intense fury against us, he stood up and said, Be quiet for a little, O men of Israel, for you do not perceive the trial which hangs over you. Wherefore, release these men, and if what they are engaged to be of human counsel, it will soon come to an end. But if it be from God, why will you sin without cause and prevail nothing? For who can overpower the will of God? Now therefore, since the day is declining toward evening, I shall myself dispute with these men tomorrow, in the same place, in your hearing, so that I may openly oppose and clearly confute every error. By this speech of his, their fury was to some extent checked, especially in the hope that the next day we should be publicly convicted of error, and so he dismissed the people peacefully. We came and related to James what had been said, and after speaking with him, we received food, and all of us passed the night with him. All night we were praying that on the next day the disputation, the cause of our truth, would take hold and overcome. On the next day, James the bishop also ascended to the temple with our entire congregation. There we found a great multitude who had been waiting for us from the middle of the night. Therefore we took our stand in the same place as before, in order that, standing on an elevation, we might be seen by all the people. Then, when profound silence was obtained, Gamaliel, who I formerly mentioned for the sake of secret assistance was our brother, for they greatly retained the counsel of such as their associates were therefore secretly keeping himself, so that when they schemed anything against us, we might know these things and thrust them away from us, and he, by a suitable counsel, might even peacefully charge those against us by intercession. However, he wisely spoke first, as if he were our enemy, but it was planned by means of his occasion to persuade the people in the love of truth to hear the word spoken. And he looked at James the bishop and began with his speech after this manner. If I, Gamaliel, deem it to be no reproach either to my learning or to my old age to learn something from babes and unlearned ones, if perchance there be anything which is for profit or for safety to acquire, for he who lives reasonably knows that nothing is more precious than the soul. Ought not this to be the object of love and desire to all, to learn what they do not know, and to teach what they have learned? For it is most certain that neither friendship nor kindred nor lofty power ought to be more precious to men than truth. Therefore you, O brethren, if you know anything more, shrink not from laying it before the people of God who are present, and also before your brethren, while the whole people shall willingly and in perfect quietness hear what you say. For why should not the people do this, when they see even me equally with themselves, willing to learn from you, if perhaps God has revealed something further to you? But if you in anything are deficient, be not you ashamed in like manner to be taught by us, that God may fill up whatever is wanting on either side. But if any fear now agitates you on account of some of our people whose minds are prejudiced against you, and if through fear of their violence you dare not openly speak your sentiments, in order that I may deliver you from this fear, I openly swear to you by Almighty God, who lives forever, that I will suffer no one to lay hands upon you. Since then you have all this people witnesses of my oath, and you hold the covenant of our sacrament as a fitting pledge, let each one of you, without hesitation, declare what he has learned, and let us, brethren, listen eagerly and in silence. These sayings of Gamaliel did not much please Caiaphas, and holding him in suspicion, as it seemed, he began to insinuate himself cunningly into the discussions. For, smiling at what Gamaliel had said, the chief of the priests asked of James, the chief of the bishops, that the discourse concerning Messiah should not be drawn but from Scriptures, that we may know, he said, whether Yeshua be the very Messiah or not. Then said James, we must first inquire from what Scriptures we are especially to derive our discussion. Then he, with difficulty at length overcome by reason, answered it that it shall be derived from the law. And afterwards he made mention also of the prophets. To him our James began to show that whatsoever things the prophets say, they have taken from the law, and what they have spoken is in accordance with the law. He also made some statements regarding the books of the kings, and in what way and when and by whom they were written, and how they ought to be used. And when he had discussed most fully concerning the law, and had by a most clear exposition brought into light whatever things are in it concerning Messiah, he showed by most abundant proofs that Yeshua is the Messiah, and that in him are fulfilled all the prophecies which related to his humble advent. For he showed that 2 advents of him are foretold, one in humiliation, which he has accomplished, the other in glory, which is hoped for to be accomplished when he shall come to give the kingdom to those who believe in him, and who observe all things which he has commanded. And when he had plainly taught the people concerning these things, he added this also, that unless a man be baptized in water, in the name of the Son of God, as the true prophet taught, he can neither receive remission of sins, nor enter into the kingdom of heaven. And he declared that this is the prescription of the unbegotten God. To which he added this also, do not think that we speak of 2 unbegotten gods, or one that is divided into 2, or that the same is made male and female. But we speak of the only begotten Son of God, not sprung from another source, but ineffably self-originated, and in like manner we speak of the Paraclete. But when he has spoken some things also concerning baptism, through 7 successive days he persuaded all the people and the high priest that they should hasten straightway to receive baptism. So, this part that's in bold, do not think that we speak of 2 unbegotten gods. So in other words, one of the gods, the Father, was unbegotten, the other one, the Son, is begotten. Or that one is divided into 2, or that the same is made male and female. So this is all, like the one divided into 2, that makes me think of kind of the basis for the Trinity, is one divided into 3. But we speak of the only begotten Son of God, not sprung from another source, but ineffably, unspeakably, in other words, unspeakably self-originated, and in like manner we speak of the Paraclete. The Paraclete's the Holy Spirit. And when matters were at the point that they should come and be baptized, a certain man, who was the enemy, entered the temple near the altar with a few men, while he cried out and said, what are you doing, O men, sons of Israel? How quickly have you been caught up with poor men, Ebionites, who have gone astray after sorcerers? While he was thus speaking and adding more to the same effect, and while James the bishop was refuting him, he began to excite the people and to raise a tumult, so that the people might not be able to hear what was said. Therefore he began to drive all into confusion with shouting, and to undo what had been arranged with much labor, and at the same time to reproach the priests, and to enrage them with reviling and abuse, and like a madman, to excite everyone to murder, saying, "What do you? Why do you hesitate, O sluggish and inert? Why do we not lay hands upon them all, and pull all these fellows to pieces?" When he had said this, he first, seizing a strong brand from the altar, set the example of smiting. Then others also, seeing him, were carried away in like readiness. Then ensued a tumult on either side of the beating and the beaten. Much blood is shed. There is a confused flight, in the midst of which that enemy attacked James and threw him headlong from the top of the steps. And supposing him to be dead, he cared not to inflict further violence upon him. But our friends lifted him up, for they were both more numerous and more powerful than the others. But from their fear of God, they rather suffered themselves to be killed by an inferior force than they would kill others. But when the evening came, the priests shut the temple, and we returned to the house of James and spent the night there in prayer. Then before daylight we went down to Jericho, to the number of 5,000 men. And after 3 days a man came from the brethren and related to us what happened after we were at the temple. For the priests were seeking for him to be among them in the appointments as priest, while unaware that he held our same faith. He told us therefore how that man, the enemy, in the presence of the priest, declared to Caiaphas, the chief priest, that he would massacre all those who believe in Yeshua. He departed for Damascus while bearing letters from them, so that after going there the unbelievers would help him slaughter the believers. He therefore intended first to go there, because he supposed that Peter went there. Now after 30 days he came upon us in Jericho, where we there buried 2 of our brethren during the night in that place. And of their own accord their graves are every year whitened all at once, extinguishing the wrath of many, for they knew that they were sons of our faith and worthy of divine remembrance. So we just read about this tumult, this fight, this riot that was raised at the temple. So James was about to end up baptizing the priest. This certain man who is the enemy entered the temple. Now we actually know who this enemy is, because he is later identified down here when he departed for Damascus bearing letters from Caiaphas the high priest. And we know from the book of Acts who this is. This is Paul. So Paul came in. Paul is this enemy. He came into the temple. He started this riot. He attacked James and threw him headlong from the top of the steps of the temple and believed him to be dead. And so he didn't attack him further from that point. And James was lifted up, and they took him away from the temple by some of the other brethren. So then you have Paul, who has now been identified by this passage here. He's departing for Damascus. Now, if we believe the official story, Paul was going in the wilderness on the way to Damascus, and that's when he had this encounter with Yeshua. That's the story they tell, but of course, Yeshua says in Matthew chapter 24, if somebody says that they see him in the wilderness, not to believe them. So we know that Paul's story is a lie. So notice that he's going for Damascus, and a couple of years back I actually figured this up. He should have reached Damascus in about 6 days. But now look, after 30 days, so he's had more than enough time to get to Damascus and come back. But after 30 days, he came upon them in Jericho. We there buried 2 of our brethren during the night at that place. So he killed a couple of brothers at Jericho. This was after he went to Damascus. So weren't we told that he went to Damascus and he was blind and he had his sight restored, and then he became a Christian, and he was this devout believer there in Damascus. This has Paul coming and attacking the Nazarenes at Jericho to the point that 2 of them died. So it doesn't sound like the Nazarene Acts does not support Paul's story of the conversion on the road to Damascus. Chapter 72, I think. Okay, we're almost done. We'll go ahead and just finish this book. Therefore, after our flight from Jerusalem to Jericho and our prayer there after the fast, a man came to us from there who 6 days prior had been sent by James, who sent him to me and said, "Do not be distressed that you are traveling alone. There are many companions for you who are eager to be with you always. Thus go now to the deed for which you were appointed. For Zacchaeus, who is in Caesarea Stratonus, wrote to me that Simon, a Samaritan from the village of Githonin, who is by artifice of sorcery turning away many of our own, he is creating factions and says concerning himself, I am the standing one. And at other times he says he is the Messiah, and also many things concerning himself, as if mystically, namely, I am more powerful than the power of the Most High, which is higher than even the God who created the world. This one is working great science by magic, and some people he has divided. Some he has turned, and some he has transferred to himself. Zacchaeus has written all these things about him, and also what sort of miracles he did, which he learned from certain people who were once his disciples, and were previously his helpers in his transgressions. Thus many there, Peter, are waiting your arrival, so that you might dispute with him in such a manner that they might see whose words are true. Therefore go boldly with haste, while you have the help of God through the Messiah, and write to me every year these things that are agreeable to the word of our teaching, and especially in the 7th years. And when he had said these things, he returned to him, and in 6 days I arrived here at Caesarea. So this is kind of the origin of Clement's mission. So James has ordered Peter to write down his preachings, and so he is employing Clement to be his scribe and actually fulfill this order from James for him. I have a theory about Simon Magus and Paul, and I haven't ever heard anyone else propose this, but in the received text of the Acts of the Apostles, Paul and Simon are both introduced at about the same time, within like 10 verses of each other. And here you see the same thing in the Nazarene Acts. Paul is introduced, and then it immediately goes to speaking about Simon the Samaritan, Simon Magus. And this is also about the time frame of Paul's trip to Damascus. So I put forth a theory that maybe what the author of the Nazarene Acts is trying to hint around to is that Paul's Messiah, the person that appeared to Paul supposedly on the road to Damascus, was actually Simon Magus and not Jesus. Part of that is because he's certainly alleged to have the power to do so. Like here, some of his signs and wonders are mentioned, but as we go further into this book, the Nazarene Acts, we'll get more information about that. But that's my theory, is that when Yeshua in Matthew 24 says that false messiahs and false prophets are going to appear, well, Paul would be the false prophet. So who is the false messiah? In other words, the false prophet has to have a false messiah. So who's his false messiah? Is it an apparition of Satan himself? Or is it possible that maybe it was an apparition of Simon Magus, and that Simon Magus was the one controlling Paul? It's just a theory, but think about it as we progress through both the Nazarene Acts and the sermons of Peter, which we'll get to later. When I came to the door, our most beloved brother Zacchaeus met me, and embracing me brought me to this lodging in which he himself stayed, inquiring of me concerning each of the brethren, especially concerning our honorable brother James. And I told him that he was limping from his shin bone, and when he asked me about the reason, I explained and told him from the beginning the things that were formerly heard, how these priests bid us to the disputation before the entire people, how each one of us 12 stood in the steps of the temple and witnessed how on the following day Caiaphas the chief priest ascended to the temple with James, the bishop of our people, and disputed for 7 days, was persuaded, and thus wanted to assemble all the people to be baptized. And as soon as they began to approach, a certain man appeared who was the enemy, and did all these things I previously said, lest I should again say these things individually. And how we fled in the night to Jericho, and how the man who is the enemy went to Damascus to destroy the ones there, and also he sent me here to you because you had written him the matters about Simon, as I said previously, so that I might come and set these things in order here to the extent that I'm able. However, after I said these things to him, Zacchaeus repeated to me the matters regarding Simon. I do not know from where Simon learned that I had come, but he sent word requesting me to speak with him before the entire multitude the next day. And after I promised him the entire city heard, in the same hour of the day I arrived here, that Peter, the chosen disciple of the one who resurrected from the dead and drove out all afflictions and diseases, would make a disputation of words with Simon from Githonin tomorrow. But as you have said, O Clement, here you inquired, arriving at our lodging, and came in to me after Barnabas excellently guided you. And I received you because he formerly told me about you, and I had learned of your sincere actions. I rejoiced greatly at your arrival, but without knowing how, I was moved in my mind, and in haste regarding everything I delivered to you, first of all the one great and eminent matter concerning the true prophet, that he alone is the good vessel for the teaching of the fear of God. Thereupon I expanded to you from the written law, and kindly revealed to you concerning each one of the principal things that is written, and I did not conceal from you any of the good things within my tradition, from the first word even until today. But the things that are yet to be you shall hear after tomorrow's disputation against Simon, during all the days you have until I expect to go to Rome. And once I am there, while you draw near, you shall know all the things that I will undertake and all the things that I will speak. But the rest of all these matters shall receive completion whenever it is acceptable to God. And after he, Peter, said these things, I confessed his great kindness and said that I would diligently prepare to do everything that I am commanded. He made me partake of food. I and those who were with him commanded us to be quiet, and thereupon became silent. And so that's the end of book 1. It kind of brings us up to the story of how Peter got to Caesarea, how Clement got there, and so then this is, book 1 is going to start speaking about their disputation and discussion with Simon. So that is a good place to stop. So thank you for listening, and next time we'll pick it up in book 2. Shalom.